All right, welcome back to The Devil in Detail, the Grendel Reread podcast. I'm Eli, and with us today is Hoche H.C. Anderson. What's up, man?
Not too much, man. Glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Good to have you. Good to have you. Ben is not with us today. He is with his little beautiful baby, Emmett. He's on baby duty tonight, so it's fine. We get it.
Excuse.
Yes. All right, so we've got Hoche Anderson, who has worked not only in the comics field, but also in journalism for the Boston Globe, the New York Times, and the Toronto Star, to name a few. He's also studied film and made films and worked in commercial illustration. He is a Harvey Award-winning author, best known for his groundbreaking work with Fantagraphics on King, Godhead, and obviously his incredible work with Grendel. So let's get right into it, man. You've always loved comics. Comics have always been a part of your life, and then this book hits. Oh gosh.
Oh God, Ronin. Yes, sir.
So what was it about this book that hit you and got you started on, like, maybe wanted to make comics or wanted to make different comics?
Definitely different comics. It's funny. Ronin actually has come up in my correspondence today because I just finished a book called Godhead, and in Godhead, right at the end, we have thank you so much, sir. I love that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
At the end of Godhead, we have a 4-page fold out, which I based directly on the 4-page fold out in Ronin.
Nice.
And there were some technical issues that we needed to figure out today. So Ronin has actually been in my mind all day long, as a matter of fact. So it's kind of funny that you bring that up.
Perfect.
Sorry, I forgot your question. I was so caught up in Ronin that I...
Right. Well, we're just, we're talking about your origins, your origin story, your start with comics. I was doing a deep dive on you today, trying to do some research, and you had mentioned that Ronin was what got you started wanting to make like a different kind of comic. So how did it hit you, and then what kind of different comics did that lead to?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had grown up and I was reading all the stuff, you would usually find on the newsstand in the late 70s and early 80s. And at a certain point, a friend of mine in the very early 80s told me that there was a thing called a comic book store and that we should go. We lived in the suburbs, and the comic book stores that we were aware of were way down in the city. So it was like an hour-long trek from the suburbs into the city to go and check the stuff out. And but my friend told me that these things were, they had these things called comic book stores where it was nothing but comics, and we were both comic book freaks. So this idea was intoxicating for the both of us. So I remember it was a Saturday. I forget, it must have been 1983 when Ronin came out.
Right.
And the two of us trekked down to a place called Dragon Lady in Toronto. And I walked in, and there was just the nirvana of comics. It was incredible. I still remember that feeling of walking in there. And I had been aware of Frank Miller. I had been vaguely aware of the work that he was doing on Ronin, on Daredevil. I had never read the stuff, but I had heard about it. I was a fan of a magazine called Comic Scene that covered, the comics scene of the 1980s. And there was a big write-up about Ronin. So I was sort of primed to see what this book was. And when I walked into this store, there the book was, just waiting for me. And I picked it up, and I was expecting to see something that I was used to, the kind of normal comics that I had gotten off the newsstand from Marvel and DC. Right. And instead, I was confronted with this entire new comics language and an entire new world. I just never seen anything like this before. And it was amazing and shocking that first of all, that the medium was capable of doing this type of work, because it just had never occurred to 13-year-old me that it was capable of doing this. And also it was shocking that somebody had that vision and had pursued it. Somebody had allowed them to pursue it, and that they'd actually gotten it on paper. So it really like tripped a bunch of switches in my mind. And it was definitely kind of a before and after moment for me. There was before Ronin and there was after Ronin, and I'm still kind of living in a post Ronin world.
Do you find, like, because what I found with reading Ronin too, it's like it expects a lot of the reader, because it's
Yes.
not just like, here's what happens, then here's what happens next. It like expects you to like tie all this stuff together in your head. And I found that a little bit with Godhead. I reread it just the other day, and I find that it's kind of the same thing. Like it expects a lot of the reader in that you need to connect these things and draw these parallels to see what everyone's talking about, and help bring all these narratives together into one cohesive story. Did you find that you found that when you were making Godhead, or?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the lessons I learned from Ronin. It's funny because I was fortunate. I went into this store recently, and I discovered all these treasury editions, these 1970s Marvel treasury editions.
Yeah.
And one of the ones that I walked away with was, I'm trying to see if it's like handy for me right now. I can just show you real quick. And of course it's not. At any rate, it was a Conan, Barry Windsor Smith Conan Treasury Edition from like 1974, I think. And it has the story Red Nails in it, written by Roy Thomas, an adaptation of one of the original Conan stories.
Mm-hmm.
And what was fascinating in reading the story, which I'd never read before, but I was aware of the old comics scripting tradition of telling and showing. In other words, they'd have a panel, and then they would, and which was clearly delineated action within this panel, but then they would have a caption that is describing exactly what is going on in the panel. It's like, what is the point of you telling me what I can clearly see with my own eyes?
Right.
Not to throw Roy Thomas under the bus, but that was the style of scripting that was going on in that era.
Yeah.
And it was sort of jarring because, once I read Ronin and the work that I've been influenced by post Ronin, and the stuff that I've, brought to the table has been the kind of work that is not, that assumes the reader has a certain sophistication and intelligence that they're bringing to bear when they read this material, so that I feel confident. And maybe it's misplaced in reader X, but reader X will catch up eventually. So in other words, what I'm saying is, maybe reader X won't get exactly what I'm saying on the first read, but I have confidence that reader X is smart enough that on read number 2, or in the second, third, fourth year of their reading of comics, that they will have attained a certain sophistication that they can figure out that even though I'm not spelling everything out to them in exacting detail, the information is there if they're willing to put in 2 or 3 seconds worth of effort to discern it. So that's one of the lessons that kind of Ronin has that taught me over the years, and that I've continued to practice.
Yeah, getting away from that idea that like Jim Shooter put forth, like every comic is someone's first comic, like
which I respect.
Right, but it's like at this point it's not, because these days everyone's first comic is Avengers Endgame or something. It's like we always make that joke, like people's first comic these days is a movie, because like that's where we're at.
Yeah,
so
totally right.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, so let's continue on forward here. Another thing Ben wanted me to ask you is about your film school years, because he teaches storyboarding at in New York, and so he really enjoys like the role film plays in comics and vice versa. So, how did your work with film influence your comic writing? Did you do storyboards as well, or how did how did they work together for you?
Wow. Yeah, as a matter of fact, it's another thing I'm hoping is like close by that I can show you real quick. And of course it's not. None of this stuff is close where I want it. Anyway, I have like a thick stack of like storyboards that I've drawn starting in film school, and then once I got out of film school for a bunch of productions. One of the things, for me, I've always thought of myself as a visual storyteller. That's kind of like my baseline. That's how I describe myself. So for me, comics and movies, they kind of come from a similar place, and just in the fact that you're using images to tell a story. So for me, there was always a lot of transferable skill between doing comics and doing films. Obviously, there are certain differences. For example, on a scripting level, if you're writing a comic script, you're telling that story in frames, in static frames. Panel 1, this happens from this angle. Panel 2, this happens from this angle. Whereas in film, you're kind of more talking more in a stream of consciousness, if you will, consciousness, whatever the phrase is.
Yeah.
You're not describing single images. You're describing kind of a frame, a time frame, and what happens within that time frame.
Yeah.
But you're still telling a story with images. So for me, there's always been like a serious overlap between the two. And the only difference really for me was the fact that rather than telling a story in static images, in film, I'm telling a story with moving images. And so it felt really natural for me to move from one to the other. There was always a fascination with both. And it was exciting to finally just get to explore both sides of the equation.
Yeah, totally. It's a lot harder to self-publish a movie than it is a comic, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that was one of the reasons why comics was so easy to gravitate to. I mean, in addition to the fact that I just loved them and I wanted to be involved with them, but it was just a lot easier to just, as I've said 1,000 times, just pick up a piece of paper and a pen and get to work. It's a lot harder to find a camera. Back in my day, it was like to find a camera and find film.
Mm-hmm.
Now if you can find a camera and a digital sensor, you're good to go. Yeah. But it's a lot, or your phone. It's a lot easier today.
Mm-hmm.
But back in the 70s and the 80s, it was a little harder. So it made much more sense for me to get into comics. I would have, I think, wound up in the same spot, wanting to explore both fields. If I'd had access to film earlier, but I would have probably gone a little deeper into the film side earlier if I'd had the opportunity.
Yeah.
But whatever, man. I love them both. I'm glad to be involved with both.
And like you said, like I just have a pen right here, but I mean, I guess I have a camera right here too, but it's like,
well,
now we do. But back then it's like you can just make, but, and so you have your written and directorial debut in Le Corbeau. Tell us about that. And then would you consider, like, I don't know, I guess this is 2 questions. So let's start with Le Corbeau. How did that come about? Where can we see it? Can we watch it?
Well, Le Corbeau's it's an interesting experience working on that film.
Yeah.
It was something that I wrote when I was in film school.
Okay.
And it's the notion I had, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to crank this out real fast. And it turned out well. So I wound up showing it to one of my professors and a bunch of other people. Long story short, we thought it was going to get made years back. It didn't. Moved on to other projects. All of a sudden, the professor that I showed it to came back to me and he said, look, I've kind of set this up. Do you still want to make this film? I was like, of course I still want to make this movie. Again, long story short, me and the producer, the professor turned out to be the producer. We wound up having some issues as a creative team. I don't want to get into specifics just because I don't mind throwing this individual under the bus, but that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So it's more of a private conversation than a public one. Gotcha. But suffice to say, the divide between us became so severe that I actually had to walk away from that movie before it was finished.
Damn.
Which was a very painful experience given how much I had put into it.
Yeah.
But my mental health was such that I was going to go nuts. I was going to commit murder if I didn't walk away from this film.
Right.
So I don't know the ultimate fate of Le Corbeau. I've lobbied to have my name taken off the film. I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm on to a couple other film projects right now, which I'm very excited about. But Le Corbeau is a bit of a stone in my heart, I have to be honest with you, because I had such high hopes for it. And what I learned from that is always make sure that you have the proper creative team around you, because if you don't, you're screwed.
Yeah. And that goes for any medium.
That goes for any medium. That really goes for film, though, because you're dependent on the collective. In comics, you can get by. I've gotten by just by myself and a publisher for years.
Right.
But in films, you're dependent on the collective. So you really need to choose your partners correctly.
Yeah. So you're striving forward in both realms, but you have yet to find like the creative freedom and the creative freedom in film as you have in comics. But you're striving to get there.
Actually, in the last year, I've made some gains that I'm pretty excited about. It's
nice.
you know these things are, you can't always say what you'd like to say in you know in the time you'd like to say it, but let's just say things have moved closer to where I want them to be on the cinematic side in the last year.
Awesome.
But you're right. You're right. I mean, it's you know, I've been in the comics game a lot longer, so it's gonna take a little longer to get to where I'd like to get in the cinematic game.
For sure. Awesome. I look forward to that. It's such a great medium. I try to do this comic stuff, you know, through the interviews, and I'm trying to work in film too. And it's such a different thing to try to see it through, you know, and I wanted to make a film of this one thing. And now I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just adapt it to comics work. So has there ever been anything you're like, hey, this is going to be a film, but you know what? Now I'm going to make it a comic, or something that you had started as a comic idea, and you're like, actually, let's try to make this in a film style, or have they been separate tracks?
They've been separate tracks for the most part. I tend to think that, you know, when I have come up with an idea, it tends to be native to whatever medium I'm thinking of it for. You know, and I try to utilize the strengths of that particular medium to tell that particular story. That's not to say that obviously anything can be adapted, clearly, but in my creative experience, I've tried to keep. Well, I haven't tried to keep. They just worked out that they've been separate. That having been said, one of the film projects that I'm working on now just so happens to be an adaptation of one of my previous graphic novels. That was not my intention. The person that approached me about working on this project was very specific that they wanted to adapt this particular property. And I was like, sure, you're giving me money to work on a film project. I'm not going to tell you through you. So
that's awesome. And that has to remain nameless at this point.
For the time. I've talked about it in the past, but it's better for now that I keep my mouth shut.
Just leave it. All right, cool. Yeah. All right, so let's shift back to comics. You're coming up in the field. You're starting to make them. You're working for Fantagraphics, and then as shout out to Ryan over on Comics Lounge, he mentioned you're working with Shelley Bond. That's like someone you had knew and worked with. She's working for Comico. So then, how did Matt Wagner's work first come into your purview, and when did you get that call to be like Grendel Tales?
Wow, those are exciting days, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Actually, Matt working with Matt came first. Fantagraphics was post Comico.
Oh, okay.
So what happened was I had this was the late 80s, and I'd become friends with a DC inker. His pseudonym, I'm not going to give you his real name because I know he wants to keep that to himself, but his pseudonym at the time was Jan Harps. Or sorry, was no, that's the wrong pseudonym. Was I've forgotten his pseudonym. Oh. Anyway, that's not important. Okay. The point is that he was working for DC at the time. And you know what? What was the name of the character in The Shining? The writer in The Shining.
Oh, Jack Torrance?
Jack Torrance.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right.
So he had a number of pseudonyms at the time, and one of them was Jack Torrance. He was going by as an inker for DC and Marvel at that point.
Nice.
So the two of us became friends, and he knew that I was an aspiring cartoonist, and he gave me my first work as doing like as an assistant. I was like drawing backgrounds and inking like panel borders and filling in blacks and all that type of stuff. And he was a friend of Matt Wagner, so he suggested that I send my stuff to Comico and that I get in touch with Matt, so on and so forth, which is what I did. And Comico got back to me. They were kind of interested in what I was doing. Comico was really great for introducing new talent. They weren't going to work with the Sienkiewicz's and the Millers of the world, but they were going to usher in the next generation. And Matt being, one of their shining examples of the next generation. Yeah. And so I got in touch with them. They were interested in what I had to do. Matt kind of liked what I was doing. And he gave me my first job, my very first professional work, doing what became Grendel Black, White, and Red, a story called Devil's Thrush. Yes, sir. That's the one thing that I've actually got
Nice.
handy myself. And so that was like I think that was 1989, maybe end of '88, beginning of 1989.
Oh,
I was so excited.
when you did
Sorry?
Devil's Thrush, that was that long? That was
Yeah,
before you
well,
did.
it was drawn years before it was actually published. It was supposed to be a
Ooh.
Comico publication, but it wound up being a Dark Horse publication.
Mm.
So I drew that thing. I was hella excited. Finally getting my first like professional 10 pages of comics.
Yeah.
I remember getting those first Comico boards. They were like extra large, like art boards. They were larger than now. It's been codified to 11 by 17. It was kind of back then, but these were oversized boards. These were more like 12 by 17 or something like that. It was fantastic and thick, hard, good quality paper.
Yeah.
And it was very exciting when you're a newbie to get that stuff. And I remember drawing that. That was great. And handed that in. Was very excited, as I said. And then I got another job almost immediately. This was Grendel 40.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like I felt there we go. Oh my God, my first cover, my first oil painting.
Really? And were they like, Tim Sale's been doing all the oil paintings for everything else. Will you do the same style or?
No, I was really influenced by Bill Sienkiewicz at that point. Bill Sienkiewicz was my god. He kind of still is. Like I'm a major Bill Sienkiewicz fan to this day.
Yeah, me too.
And but back then it was my first flush of being like, oh my God, Bill Sienkiewicz is the beginning and the end. He's the alpha and the omega. And so my determination was to like be like a painted cover artist, like him, like Chaykin, like Kent Williams, John J. Muth, like just people like that. I was really inspired by. Yeah. And so that was my goal. Not a very good painting, but I was 19, man. I did the best I could for 19.
I mean, it really fits in with the book. I mean, because the red splotches, which I'm sure is Sienkiewicz-y to you, but I think it also is very Tim Salian. Tim Salian?
You know what?
It's Tim Salian,
Let's go with that. That works for me.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? For me anyway, maybe you won't find it that interesting, but 2 times in my life, I've had other people's original art sent back to me. One time was Fantagraphics, and they accidentally sent me back a bunch of Jaime Hernandez and Daniel Close pages.
Wow.
All of which I was tempted to like pretend that I hadn't gotten and just keep.
Right.
But unfortunately, I was like, my conscience kicked in, and I sent them back. But the other time that happened was on Grendel. And that cover that you have for for Grendel 40, that was sent to me along with a bunch of his interior pages. And that was I was like, it was amazing. I was like, all of a sudden I've got this like incredible piece of Tim Sale art in my hands. Yeah. And again, the temptation was, do I just keep this? Do I give it back? What do I do here? I gave it back. But I'm not gonna lie.
They'll reward your honesty and be like, just keep it.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely. It was very exciting to see those Tim Sale paintings as well. Like it was that was the era of the painted comic, and so seeing that work was very galvanizing.
Yeah, and this run had a lot of amazing art. So this is interesting. This is really interesting because you did this work before you did this work, and yet they came out 8 years differently. So then, what did they tell you about Devil's Thrush first, and then what did they tell you to start writing Devil Worship?
I don't really remember much about what the commentary was. I remember having a conversation with Matt, a couple of conversations with him, just to get to know him to get to know me. Him telling me about his method and describing a little bit about Grendel. Then after that, I think it was Diana Shutt sent me like a big stack of Grendel comics and excuse me, a bunch of Mage comics as well, which is an amazing comic, by the way. So that was exciting to get. So it was cool to get immersed in this world. But in terms of what they told me, they were very free. They were just like, you do you. Just don't embarrass us. Just make the work good. And You know what's fascinating? You've got this for me. Again, this is one of those stories for me is interesting, maybe not for anybody else. You've got that Stan Lee poster in the background, the cover for issue 1 of that 2-part miniseries. I was obsessed with that miniseries around the time that I was drawing Grendel 40. So a lot of my inking was heavily influenced by what Mobius was doing in Silver Surfer. Obviously, I have not 1/100th of the skill that Mobius has, especially when I was 19. But it's just so interesting for me to see that poster there, because I was thinking about it as I was rereading the comic this afternoon, how much that comic had influenced the work that I was doing on that comic. So that's good on you, man, for like reading awesome. My mind and putting that Mobius poster back there.
That's amazing. I have that Surfer tattooed on my arm right here as well, because it's like one of my favorite stories.
Yeah, man, I love it. Stan Lee in 1990 or whatever was not the Stan Lee necessarily of the 1960s, but I still have to give him a lot of props for recognizing Mobius as the genius that he is and writing something, crafting a story for him. That's pretty impressive as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that the Surfer as a character, if we may digress into an episode of the Surfer Cast, when Stan was writing the Surfer, he wrote it differently than his normal writing and prose style. When he wrote for Jack, he wrote for Jack. When he wrote for Buscema, he wrote for Buscema. Like it was like the Surfer just brought out something different in Stan, and I think that's something he's even gone on record as saying, that it was like such a personal thing.
I think that's absolutely true. Have you read the Surfer graphic novel that him and Jack did?
Yes.
The standalone.
Oh my God, it's the background of my computer here. I love that one. Man. It's so cool. It's so good. Yeah. I'm such a big Surfer fan. He's like, the Surfer and Grendel are like two of my tops, and it's amazing. Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say is I have a Silver Surfer, like a deep cosmic Silver Surfer adventure I want to pitch to Marvel. So I'm hoping to get my hands on that character at some point in the next few years.
They just had that recent story, Silver Surfer Rebirth, that just is like on the stands right now. It's like okay, but there's a really cool scene where they bring together, like in a Spider-Man Spider-Verse style. You got a Kirby Surfer, a Mobius Surfer, the Allred Surfer, which is mind-blowingly amazing, and then like a Buscema Surfer or something like that, and they're all together with this Ron Lim Surfer. It's pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a good issue.
Nice.
All right. This ends this episode of the Surfer Cast. Thanks for joining us. All right, back to Grendel Cast. Cool, sweet. So okay, so we were talking about like the scripting and you working on Grendel Tales from number 40, and we learned from Matt interviewing him from other issues and interviewing people like Jim Mahfood and Farrell Dalrymple about their work with Matt, that it was very loose, and sometimes Matt would just have a couple ideas and leave it up to the writer, or sometimes Matt would write directly to the writer. In Mahfood's case, it was like a graffiti story. So like, did he send you a full script? I know you were saying it was really loose. Did he send you a loose script, a semi-script, no script? How did it work for issue 40? I guess really for both of them.
Well, Matt wrote Devil's Thrush, the 10-page, the black, white, and red story, but it was Stephen T. Seagle who wrote Grendel 40.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Right. So it's been a while. I don't remember precisely. If my memory is accurate, I want to say that Matt sent me kind of like a Marvel style page-by-page breakdown minus the dialogue. And then, because I remember having a conversation with him where he's like, once I get your art back, it'll only take me like an hour to like write the dialogue. And I remember thinking, wow, you're like so good. You can just like crank it out in an hour. Like, yeah, you can go Matt Wagner. Yeah. And then like, I sent in the art, and then I got like a dialogue script, like a little while later. That's how I remember it. I never throw anything out. So I'm sure I've got this stuff in a storage box somewhere, but I haven't had a chance to go back and look at it in many years. So I'm working off of years old memories here. But I'm pretty sure that's how that went. I think I want to say Steven Seagle sent me like a full script. I'm pretty sure that's how that worked. And one of my memories about his writing was like I've always been like maybe too obsessed with dialogue. Like I'm maybe too much of a wordy writer. And I remember being really struck by how economical he was as a scripter. I remember having a conversation with him where he said, like, you know, if you're gonna write like tons of like words in a like, you know, he said like if you're gonna write tons of words, write a novel. Don't write a comic.
Right.
They're just not designed for that. And I kind of see what he means, but I can't help it. I just personally, I just write a lot of words. I'm trying to tone that down, but it's hard for me. So,
but you've also done novels as well, right? So you took that to heart. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's nice because you can just write and you don't have to like worry so much about, you know, cutting it down to fit into a panel or on a page. That's one of the good things and the bad things about comics is the good things is that it requires a certain discipline. You know, you only have a certain amount of real estate on that page, so you can't go ape shit. So that lends itself to a certain economy of writing. But at the same time, if you want to tell a complex story, a complex, nuanced, layered story, sometimes you need a couple extra words, man. Like that's just how it is. And the two things sometimes are at odds.
Right. And I mean, if we're talking about using a lot of words, but getting a lot across, these Tim Sale, this full run that we've been going through, they don't shy away from, you know, these giant text boxes on the page to really get a strong narrative across. So let's bust into the story here, since we are the read through podcast. We're not going to go page by page like Ben and I do, but I do want to get, you know, a little bit of the story across and then talk a little bit about it with you. So the story focuses on Marcus Brand. He's a college student, and we're in the time frame of these stories, You Now, and we're at basically a college campus when there's like protests. And is this something like, because you say you were like 19 when you did this, were you in college? Was there protesting going on as well that you were involved in? Did that lead to it? Or you said Steve wrote this all, so it wasn't you?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, you know, this was pre, you know, LA riots. This was a couple of years before the LA riots, but that, you know, that lead up to protest was, you could feel it in the air. This was the era of Public Enemy, you know, and Do the Right Thing. That was kind of my political awakening around then, learning about the civil rights movement. And so those embers were kind of floating through the air at that point. Right. But I can tell you specifically, the touchstone that Stephen was working from on this story was Kent State. He sent me specifically articles about Kent State. He sent me photographic reference for Kent State. And you can, if you're familiar with some of the imagery around Kent State, you'll see very clearly where I have used Kent State imagery. In fact, this is a Kent State image right here. There's, I'll show you a couple other things specifically that are Kent State. This is a Kent State image right here, where the soldiers moving in towards the troops. This here is Kent State imagery right here, with the soldiers, you know, turning their weapons on the students. And there's another one very specifically Kent State, and this is a Kent State image. You'll find a very famous photograph of one of the students shot dead, bleeding out. And that's where I took that from. So this is like very specifically commenting on what was going on in Kent State.
Oh, that's very interesting. Grendel has always been seemingly a conduit to make these sort of broad political statements, and to really use, again, like a great science fiction or anything does, is able to use its future to comment on our present.
Absolutely. That's what science fiction is supposed to do, as far as I know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, when I was doing the deep dive, you had mentioned something about a Walt Disney Man in Space, or Man on the Moon film strip that you watched. And I found it on YouTube. I'm excited to watch it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That is one of these seminal bits of my creative DNA, man. That goes right back to like I think I was 4 or 5 years old when I saw that, and
I love that.
I still remember that impact of it all these years later.
Is that like, it's one of those memories where like you're probably too young to have any other memories, but it was so impactful that you just remember it, even though you're like really too young. Man, I have it. Yeah. I have one of those too. I've watched the first episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was like 4 years old, but like it was enough that like I remember it. I remember the room. I remember the smells of the carpet and what, you know, I remember everything about that moment, you know, like it's so cool. Yeah. All right. All right. So
things stay for life.
They stick with you. And when it's something creative, because it's almost like, you know, they say we only use like whatever half of our brain, but like it's those images and then they like pop, like they opened up like a new little cavern in your brain that's just like, okay, this is like a creative center and we're going to keep going.
Exactly. Well said.
Thank you. All right. So Marcus is like a dude who idolizes Grendel, and basically his final paper, his what's it called? His thesis is about Grendel and the symbology of Grendel. And he's like so into it, so much so. And we see this part of the story kind of juxtaposed in the top corner of each page as the Grendel eyes are going through. And I mentioned to you earlier, it's hilarious to be covering this because I literally got the Grendel eyes tattooed on my body like a week ago when I was in your hometown, or your town of Toronto.
That's right. You are the literal Marcus Brand.
Exactly.
You're Eli Brand.
I'm Eli Brand. I've been branded. It's great. Some of it I was like, yes, I want to represent this guy forever, you know, but then I was like, I'm not going to get it covered up. I'll be fine.
Did you get it over the left?
I didn't get it over the heart. No, I'm saving that spot for the Star Trek emblem that I'll get eventually.
All right, that's fair.
So I can beam myself up, you know. My girlfriend does not like that idea, but I still want.
Yeah, I'm sure she's got some issues.
It's too hairy there, you know. It's like it's gonna get covered up in the bush. Anyway, okay, so Marcus Brand, he's like on campus, he's getting this, and so we cut back every page to like the process of the eyes getting there, and you could almost read that as its own single narrative, and then
absolutely, I've done that myself actually.
Oh yeah, it's very cool. Again, we always talk about on this podcast how Matt and how Grendel storytelling is constantly pushing the envelope of comics and doing things that no other comics do, and you know, so this is just another one of those amazing storytelling techniques. And so Marcus gets a flyer on campus for a "Put an End to You Now, You Know It's Wrong" for a rally at Yale-Cram Hall. And was it your idea to make it Toronto University since you're a Torontonian?
Yes, it was.
You got to add
get much personal resonance into the story as I possibly could, and I was very grateful that Stephen was like, "Cool, man, no worries, whatever you want."
Did you hand letter that, or?
Yeah. By the way, always listen to what your artist has to say, what your artist wants to do, because they're the ones who are going to realize your story. It's not you, it's the artist. So if they want to do something, your response is no problem.
Yes. My friend Rocco is always saying, I think I'm getting this right, but the writer is only the writer. Like if you're looking at a comic as a film, the writer is just the writer, but the artist is the director, the actors, the lightings, the prop design, the set design is like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Every
single other team. Yeah.
100%. Totally agree.
Even the grips. All right. Every single job on the set, even the PAs, because he gets his own coffee. So. All right, so we continue on, and he's like finds that he's got this roommate too, and we get to see his room, which is like amazingly rendered. Like there's so much great stuff, like posters, action figures, Grendel soap, Grendel book. We're always talking about this too, as like Grendel grew. It really is commoditized, like to the Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles level. Like it's like every single thing, like Grendel is the number one, you know, property. So, and
he's the rock star.
Exactly. We're always talking like, because there's another thing where there's like a Grendel live on stage poster somewhere. So there's like a musical, there's film. So not in this one. It was in, I think it was when Christine was like younger. and it was in that one that Diana wrote.
Christine Spar, my favorite characters in comics ever.
Really nice.
Yeah,
she has such an amazing
run they did, man.
Yes, and because when you think about it, this is another thing we always talk about. She's basically the artist, the author, and architect of everything we read about Hunter Rose too, because she's the one that found the notes and wrote Devil by the Deed, and so like her view of Grendel is like our view. So it's cool.
Absolutely, man.
So much coolness in this book. All right, so his roommate's like, there's a lady looking for you. She's an activist. Her name is Rita, and she's like, she wants to dress as a trooper, and he's like the guy that knows everything about Grendel. You know, like in my life, if someone's got a Ninja Turtles question, they'll call me up. It's like the same thing. You know, it's like he's the guy. He's the Grendel guy. So he's like, nah, I'm out of here. I'm going out, and he's like, I'm gonna go to the rally. It's at Yell Cram Hall. Is that a Torontonian reference? I'm always trying to get the Easter eggs.
That is entirely a Stephen C. Seagle. That's a Stephen C. Seagle original.
All right.
I was curious about that myself. I think I asked him. I was like, "What's up with Yell Cram Hall?" But I don't remember him giving me an answer. So
sometimes I think about an easy thing for a writer is to make something they know and flip it backwards, but still, that's not Markley. That's nothing either.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No. One of my characters is a synthesizer player, and he plays the Moog synthesizer, and so his planet is what? Goom. Moog backwards. It's just it's easy, but it works, you know. And if you're smart enough, you can think. All right, so he's there, and Rita is like leading these protests. She's talking about You Now and basically all these events that we read about in the Tim Sale Grendel series that we just wrote up, like all these atrocities. You Now is like taking over all these countries because Orion Asante wants to take over the entire world, and she views him as a dictator. And we know that he's this like troubled leader who was just trying to lead, but everything kept escalating, and he did end up taking over the entire world. And then the cops bust in. It's an illegal assembly. I love these hand letters, man. And you painted it yourself too, right? You colored it? Bernie colored it.
Bernie Miro did the painting.
Yeah.
Another
Canadian. Did you ever get to meet Bernie or work with Bernie at all? Or you just...
I never have, unfortunately. He was him and Matt at the time were living in Montreal, and I was in Toronto. And I just never got a chance to meet them. Yeah, but I had friends who knew both of them, but there was not much overlap, unfortunately. But one thing I wanted to point out real quick about the cop on page 7 and 8, that is actually based on Bull Connor, who was he was like the police chief of, I'm gonna totally mess this up. It was like Alabama or somewhere down south when the civil rights movement was going on. He stood up against, King stood up against Bull Connor, and and then Bull Connor wound up turning the cops, the firemen, and the fire hoses, and the police dogs on the protesters. That was all at the behest of Bull Connor.
Oh my God.
I had not started working on my King biography at this point, but I had started researching it at this point. And I had started watching Eyes on This Prize, a famous PBS miniseries, two-part miniseries, well, multi-part really, about the civil rights movement. And Bull Connor was in my mind. So when I was drawing this, Bull Connor just suddenly was like appearing on the page. So
he does have that trivia, like 50s cop vibe. He's got those glasses and...
Absolutely. You look at Bull Connor and you look at this guy, and you can see clearly where I was getting my influence from.
Interesting. I love it. I love getting these insights, man. And so you did the hand color, you did the hand letters, but there's some digital. Wait, you did all the lettering too, or?
This was paste up. That the font that you're seeing there, that was paste up. If you see my board, I have somewhere still. That's all like photostat paste up on there.
Oh, interesting. So how does that work? It's like the tones, you cut them and paste them in like you would cut a tone or something, right?
A little bit, yeah. Like in this era, it was all analog. So anytime you'll see, like for example, God, I wish I had the wherewithal to pull out some of my original art. I still have a few pages around. But anyway, for example, when you see like you now here,
Right.
or this line, this like bit of text on there, that was like kind of a glossy photostat that somebody printed up. However you do photostats, I've never actually constructed one personally. And they cut it out and they pasted it on to the original artboard, probably with rubber cement at that point. When I did my own paste up, it was always with a wax roller. Those are the two most widely used methods, rubber cement or wax. And I was a wax guy, so that's how I did mine. But this, so that's how folks did it back then. And it's really interesting to go back and see original art from this era, because it's so fascinating as an artifact. First of all, it's actually original art. It's not some digital file. It's like a piece of board that you can look at. And it's got stuff stuck on it and, registration, stickers in the corner, and it's got scratch marks on it from where the artist scratched out like a line or whatever. It's fascinating. I love to see original art because they're so ragged and kind of beat up. And yet when they're printed, they're these pristine, beautiful things. The disparity between them is so interesting to me. So anyway.
That was a huge revelation for me. Well, sorry, what was that again?
I was just saying I'm waxing poetic about the old days.
Literally waxing poetic about paste ups.
Exactly, yeah. Nice.
And would that be the same with like these let's see, like these ones here too?
Yeah, yeah. All that typesetting there, that's all paste up.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Probably even one or two of the panels that I didn't like, I would have like redrawn and pasted up, or something like this. When you see like this panel and this panel here, how they repeat. That's not computer. That's like me going to Kinko's, getting a photocopy, coming back home and pasting it on with my wax roller. So
nice. I always liked that style. It's such a dynamic storytelling technique to duplicate a page or a panel like that. I love it.
I do too. Some artists feel though that it's cheating, that you should like redraw it, and I always feel like no, I'm not going to redraw.
Rules in comics, get them out of here.
Exactly. Thank you. Couldn't agree more.
Yes, exactly. All right, so on the next page, it continues like, and she's like, basically, hell no, we won't go. Like, don't try to silence us pigs. And they go the nuclear option with the flamethrower, and they're like, let's just burn them out of here. Not a big deal.
Sounds like the cop. And then let's lie about it after the fact.
Exactly. Wow. They were being crazy. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
and you have him here at the bottom of page 9 too, talking with the police or talking with the news people and just being like, another example of the uncontrolled student radicalism running rampant in this country. It's insane how many of these things from this have come back.
I'm telling you, it was shocking to me, like rereading this afternoon, how much it was like, I was surprised at how much we got it right about how much these people lie, blatantly lie, and do it with no shame whatsoever, expecting that we're just going to buy it. And guess what? We always do. So this was kind of surprising to read this page after 25 plus years.
Yeah, it keeps happening with these dystopian future science fiction stories. You're like, holy shit.
You can rest assured that people in power are always going to lie to you.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyway, let's move on.
All right. Next page, we're back in with his roommate, and he says like, sorry, and he's like, no, you're not. You always do this and turn on the light when I'm trying to sleep. Anyway, he keeps saying like, he's saying to what we were just saying, that he heard all this other stuff. She was dressed up like Grendel in full costume, and she was, talking all this shit. So again, like, here's the story again getting corrupted to make it seem like they did it. They were the ones when they were peacefully organizing and protesting.
Yep. And fake news.
Exactly. And it becomes more in this thing too, that he begins to realize, and he's like, no, she's not Grendel. Grendel chooses you. You don't choose Grendel. So it's this thing again, like, because he's thinking about himself as with this fascination with Grendel, he wants to be this thing, but then he's like, do I want to be this thing? Am I really? Would I be happy if I had 3 adamantium claws growing out of my hand and I would always be ripping people apart? Like, I'm not sure, actually. Like, it sounds fun, but and at the end of the day, how do my wrists even move? Do they go all the way down? I don't get it.
Are you just overthinking it?
I think so, yeah. Right.
That much time.
I know they did. Not at all. All right, so we continue it. Oh, good.
I was just gonna say it's interesting because they both, it's like they kind of both want to be chosen by Grendel, and yet really neither one of them is. But anyway,
because it's like when you least expect it, when you least want it, it takes over. It was different for Christine Spark because she was like born into it, raised by it. Like Bane. But like so it was different for her, and then it like wore off on Brian Lee Sung because he loved into it or whatever. So like, but you can't just collect the action figures and then become an X-Man.
And you can't just spout the talking points and then become it.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to live it and be it. All right, so on the next page, 12 and 13, what's his name again? Marcus is on his way to the Civic Center for a religious oddities public auction, where very strange, where a piece of the Grendel mask is being auctioned off. This seems crazy to me because when you think about Batman versus Grendel, the Prime one, they had like Hunter's piece of his mask, might be the same piece, a piece of his mask and his skull, like in a museum in the 90s. So it's like, it seems like at this point when Grendel's so big, I mean, this is like buying the cowl from the 89 Batman movie or James T. Kirk's ripped tunic or something like this. I feel like this would, he says $6,100, $6,000. That's a steal. Yeah, that's a steal, man.
I guess. I don't know. I mean, the auctioneer wanted it for like his opening bid was $100.
$100.
Geez.
Oh, it was worn by both Christine and Hunter Rose. That's like if it was worn by Kirk and Picard. It's like, or Aiden, whatever, who played young Han and the old Han. Harrison Ford. Come on. All right, so then he gets this and he steals it, and so now he has this living piece of like Grendel history. He has a connection now. Maybe he is hoping that like, okay, now I have something that Christine and Hunter held. Can I be Grendel now? Does this have like, it's like a SARS blanket or like something you're trying to like catch the disease, or
he wants it badly. Yeah.
He goes to the grocery store without a mask and he's like,
give me all the Grendel.
Yeah, he's trying to get Grenvid, but I don't think he's gonna get it. He continues to like think about his tattoo too. Like he wanted something deeper, something to prove his level of commitment. He bought this piece. He's getting it the eyes of the devil on his chest over his heart. And then he goes into his school where he meets his professor. He has some questions about his paper, and he's like, dude, Marcus, you haven't heard? Everyone's leaving. We're out of here. There's the police, the Grendels have descended upon the school, and it's like, it is not safe to be here. You need to get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
He's not.
And in rereading this today, I couldn't help but have a little bit of disdain for the professor. I kind of felt like his only objective, once he realizes that the shit is about to rain down, is to just get the hell out of there, which I understand.
Right.
But what about your students, man? Like, he has no regard for his students whatsoever. All he cares about is getting his own ass out of there. I don't know. I was reading it today and I was like, dude, man, I'm kind of not impressed with you, buddy.
Yeah. And like, what is he gathering? He wants to get out of there, but he needs like these papers. Like,
who the hell knows? He's got essays he needs to mark or something like that.
Yeah,
no regard for like by his students whatsoever.
No, or the pride of being a leader or being some sort of upstanding person in the school. So much so that he would go there for advice in these troubled times.
He is a purely Republican teacher, this guy. I'm telling you right now.
Oh man. So he's out of there and he's just like, close the door on your way out. Like, don't let the door hit you in the ass on your way out.
Yes,
like
on the way out.
All right. So we keep going. He's got this piece of Grendel mask that he's like kind of holding dear. He's like keeping in his pocket. It's maybe like a rabbit's foot. It's like a talisman that he's keeping with him. And
Exactly.
there's another protest that he's going to. We've been occupied. We must not allow the government to mask the issues we have brought up. And so it continues to escalate, and Rita continues to escalate, but in a peaceful manner, in just protest, like you said, Kent State, again. And yet her words seem to be equal to the police's bullets in their minds. Like, these are equal weapons that we can battle with, which is another problem, you know?
Well, you're never allowed to stand up to the people in power. You're challenging those in power is tantamount to you firing, arms at the people in power. Right. In fact, in some ways, I think it's in their minds even worse, just because the virus of an idea, has so much danger out there. Yeah, it's like, I mean, look at any police action in 2020, 2021, 2022, and you'll see exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty disgusting.
Oh my gosh. There hasn't been any change since this 1986, 1990, whenever this was published.
No. This is horrifyingly relevant storytelling, I'm sorry to say.
Yes. And on the next page, Rita throws a rock and says, "Down with the police state." Again, a simple weapon, one that wouldn't cause anything. They have armor on, helmets on, all this stuff, and every single one of those cops just begins shooting.
Yep. The cowardice of cops, man.
Yes.
The cowardice of the armed aggressors of the state. What I find fascinating, it kind of harkens back to what happened in Uvalde just the other day. These cops, there's a program called 1033, in which what am I trying to say? And police forces across the United States are given access either at reduced rates or in many cases absolutely for free of excess military, weaponry. So that means you've got like cops running around with combat, ready machinery, firearms, body armor, and armed vehicles, combat ready, and they're using this on civilian streets.
Right.
The people in Uvalde had access to this 1033, military grade machinery or technology. And yet their cowardice was such that they refused to go in and like save children, for crying out loud, children and teachers from this armed moron, this armed assassin.
That's the one where the mom ran in herself, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. That's the one where the cops decided that they were too afraid to go in for like more than an hour to go and save people, even though they were armed to the fucking tits.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I just, I have some issues with the way the people who are charged with protecting the state choose to protect the civilian population, because they don't give a shit about us at all.
No, they don't. It's insane, and it's reflected here in these stories, and it's something that is an amazing thing that comics can do. Again, is help us all reflect on them and get these ideas out where these people will never see it. Probably a place where we can, our own private echo chamber of rage that helps us get it all out on the paper and not internalized for too long. Maybe
talk to me, brother.
On this next page, there's some serious artness that I wanted to talk to you about. Did you lay in this pattern here underneath her, like the rug, the carpet, or
this thing, this one right here?
Yeah.
Yeah. This was, I mean, again, we're talking so like the late 80s. So this is still the analog era.
Right.
So actually I can actually show you some of this stuff. Give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
I just happen to have, so back in the old days, we would use Letraset, Letratone screens. And I actually have a book. Do I have it close by? I don't anymore. It's somewhere. But it has, oh, well, looky here. The first screen that I saw was the actual screen from Grendel.
No way.
Yeah, this is the very one.
Oh, that's
so
amazing.
This is probably the same sheet that I used back in like 1989 to like cut that screen in this book. But what you would do is, you would like take your X-Acto, or in my case, it was an Olfa, and you'd like cut out a section, peel off the back, stick it down on the board, and that's how you would achieve that effect. I've got like a, I've got a ton of these things that I've saved from the old days. Nice. So what I do now is, rather than if I don't use them that often anymore, I still use them every now and then. But what I do now is I would scan this, right. And so I've got like an unlimited supply, because this, I forget how much this would cost, but when you're like a teenager in 1989, like this stuff was expensive. I forget exactly how much, but it was probably like $10 a sheet.
Yeah.
And for a 19-year-old in 1989, that's a lot of goddamn money.
Yeah.
So this stuff was very it was valuable stuff. So anyway, so that's how that was achieved.
And so you would, like, I've used some of this, but I mean, still you would cut each and every single one of these frames out, like outside of the person, outside of the sign, outside of the next panel. Wow.
You'd have to put a big screen over it, and then for the next hour you're sitting there cutting out this little part that's covering the person's arm or their leg or their body or whatever. So that was that took some doing back in the old days. But when you were finally done, man, it was satisfying.
And it looks so good.
Yeah.
I've got a few pages of it that I bought recently off of a deleter website.
Oh, right on.
And so I've been trying to mess with it, and I brought some samples when I was there in Toronto, and we were making comics at the bar after the show. I'd be like, "Rip your own tones, man!" So we were all trying to like rip it.
Yeah, baby.
It's super fun. I love it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. It's laborious, and it can be a little tedious, but I mean, it's still satisfying once you.
It looks great, and you can tell the difference between it and a digital tone, I think.
I think so.
And even when I use digital tones now, I'll take it and move it like a couple up and a couple over, so it like looks a little like off, know, to give it the
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we're continuing here. The cops are racing in, and she's running out, and he begins to follow her. I keep forgetting his name. Marcus keeps following Rita.
Marcus Grant.
All right, and he's like, they're saying block that door, and she runs up to the roof. It looks like. And then this is an interesting thing here. He asks her, "Hey, are you Grendel?" Like, which is interesting. And then she's kind of like, "What do you mean? Like, what?" And then right at that point, they see that a Grendel is climbing up the side. So what do you think he meant there? Like, he didn't say a Grendel, which I think is like what these police and the army forces call themselves. But like, what do you think he meant there? Like, are you...
Well, I mean, I don't know, but I assume, that he's wondering if she's like the actual, Hunter Rose, Christine Spar, Brian, I forget his last name.
Lee Sung.
Reincarnation of, the actual authentic Grendel spirit.
Right.
That's the only reason, that's the only interpretation I could come up with for that.
Yeah. We often wonder if it's got this, like, if it's like this spirit feeling. Like, I always liken it to remember there's that movie with Denzel Washington, I can never remember what it's called, but you would touch you and this spirit would go through you and you would be this like evil killer, and they would sing "Time Is on Your Side" by the Rolling Stones.
I know. I don't remember the name of the movie, but I know the one that you're talking about. Yeah,
I always think about it like that. Like it's this thing that moves through people. It's this spirit. But Matt refuses to say whether it is that or not. He refuses to pin anything down like that, which I like a lot about him.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, that was always the impression I got from reading the comics, that it was clearly a spirit that was moving from person to person. I didn't think that was in question. I'm actually a little surprised to hear that he was making that ambiguous.
Yeah, he won't. I think he likes that about it, is like keeping things ambiguous, keeping everyone guessing. Like,
sure. Like yeah.
All right, so this is
interpretation of Grendel. That's obviously what is going on. So
I think so as well.
Yeah.
But who knows? We'll see, and maybe things will elucidate even more. Ben and I are pushing Matt to do another round of red, white, and black, black, white, and red, white, black, and red, or something. But
I would, man, ask him to give me a call, because I feel like I did my 2 Grendels way back in the day. I'm a little bit better of a cartoonist now. I would like to redeem myself on this project, but
it's funny because many of the artists we've interviewed, like again Farrell and Jim, were like 2 of the big ones who also, because like you said, Matt and the Comico people, they got to these creators when they were young. They're up and coming. They helped them like take a jump off, and so they're all like, I'd love to have another shot at it. Yeah. But man, we're on the other side here being like, we love these stories so much, man. But
dude, I'm telling you, rereading this today was painful. He's like, oh my God, I can't do this. But I kept going because I knew we were going to talk about it. And then I came to this one. I was like, I got a page, maybe a page and a half in. I was like, I can't do it. I cannot do it. The writing is great. It's not the writing, it's the images, man. I just can't look at my old art. It's tough. So I would love to go back and have another shot and do it right.
Man, we never we didn't know that this was done, that Black, White, and Red was done so much earlier than this story. Like, I mean, I guess in retrospect looking, you can tell it's a much looser style, but like, man, we loved that story when we covered it.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome, man. I think I don't remember exactly what the issue was, but I'm almost certain there was some kind of a rights thing going on, and maybe it was
because it's a real song in there. It's a real song in there. I remember we found it.
Oh, is that right? Oh, I didn't I didn't know that.
Sure.
Well, I don't think it was that song though. I think it was just there was a rights thing in general. And again, it was years ago, I don't remember it precisely, but I also want to say it might have had something to do with the fact that Comico was, they were on their way out at that point.
Oh yeah. The dark ages that we don't talk about of Comico versus Matt. That was an intense time,
I think there might have been there was definitely it wasn't because they wanted to hold it back. Like there was a reason that they could not publish it, and it was Dark Horse years after the fact that finally got it out. But I forget precisely what.
Okay, I'll have to ask Matt.
Yeah, please. I'd like to know myself.
Yeah. All right, so this Grendel is climbing up on the roof, and she comes up and just boots him right off the roof, and he's like, you just killed that guy. And she very astutely says he'd do the same to me.
She is pragmatic to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's absolutely true, man.
Yep.
And he's kind of like, but you can't just do that. And she's like, she doesn't know why she followed him up here. And she kind of turns to him, puts her back to the situation. And that's when she gets hit.
That's when she gets hit right in the back.
Damn.
Brutal.
And then, like you said, on the next...
Sorry, all I was going to say is I think this original art belongs to Diana Schutz. I'm almost certain that she bought this off of me. Anyway,
very whatever that of page 23.
Yes, no, page 22, I believe. Pretty sure she owns that.
Nice.
Hey, sorry,
Diana has an amazing collection of stuff.
I'll bet she does.
She's so cool. We love her on the cast.
Awesome. As well you should.
We had an amazing interview with her. I don't know if you saw it or not, but
I have not. I would love to see Diana interview.
It's great. We have one with her, just her, and then we have one with her, Tim Sale and the other guy that worked on Devil's Child with her, Teddy Christensen. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Guy.
Amazing.
So cool.
That's awesome.
And
rest in peace, Tim Sale, by the way.
Rest in peace, Tim Sale. So much love to him. He's one of our absolute favorites. He drew this Grendel eyes for me actually at a con about 12 years ago.
Oh, that is so cool, man.
Yeah. So I
Very
was
cool.
like, I've got to get this now to honor him, to honor this amazing comic that we've now put so much time into and that I've spent so much of my life collecting. So it's just like it was very meaningful. Yeah. And so you said on 23 here that this was a Kent State image that you used, but then he drops these Grendel eyes, this fragment of the devil, and it lands kind of covering her face.
Yep.
Powerful image here, powerful page, just as the tattoo is being finished.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as he was saying in the past couple story in the words with the eyes, he's beginning to think that this idol he followed might just be wrong. And then the final reveal is that the removal hurt almost as much as getting it done in the first place. He was young and arrogant, 22, and he's now scarred forever to remind himself that he is not Grendel.
Yeah, he's not Grendel, man.
Man, powerful.
To that ideology. It's a tight little story. It's a good little story. When I reread it today, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. The art notwithstanding, the writing is quite good.
I think the art is
my own art.
Yeah,
and another bit of trivia: this last page here was actually, if you go and look at the poster for the Oliver Stone film, Talk Radio, I think from 1988. I'm pretty certain I stole this image from that. I haven't looked at it for a while, so I'd have to take another look, but I'm pretty sure that's where that came from. I still am, but I was a massive Oliver Stone fan. That run that he had from like 1985 to 1995 is incredible to me. Yes. And Talk Radio was kind of in the middle of that run. And yeah, so that was my little Oliver Stone homage, if you will.
Nice. I haven't seen that, but it's going to be on the screen right now in the final edit. But I was big into The Doors, though. I watched that Doors movie a ton of times.
I love that movie. It's a lot of people hate it, and probably for good reason. But I adore that movie for my own reasons.
I love it. One of my favorite people, Bill Graham, is in it, playing himself, basically. Music promoter Bill Graham.
Absolutely, yeah.
Dudes, yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay, so this story is amazing. We love it. What a great way to, it's the final issue of the Comico run. It's the last one before really the floor falls out of Comico, and there's the dark period we talk about when Comico and Matt were in all the bullshit they were dealing with, and then it finally breaks free and they get through to Dark Horse, almost like the events of the story. It's insane. Yep. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Life
man.
Can sometimes be just as insane.
Life.
Yes. Amazing. All right, sweet. Thank you so much for going through the story. Now let's talk a little bit about what you're working on now, what you're doing now, why we're not seeing Luke Cage, and what is all going on with Godhead 2.
Godhead 2. Godhead is done. Super excited.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I'm amazed that I was convinced that I was not going to survive long enough to finish this stupid comic. I was like, I'm going to get hit by a truck. I'm going to fall off a bridge. I'm going to have a heart attack. Something's going to happen to like wipe me out before this stupid thing is finished. So when the day finally came, I was done. I mean, I was done. I didn't have anything else to do. I just had to like hand it into Fantagraphics. It was a weird day. I was kind of dazed.
Yeah.
I was like, did I actually like make it here? I don't know what's going on. But so that was good. Anyway, so Godhead's finished. Very excited about that. That's coming out in December.
Awesome. And it's available for pre-order now on the Fantagraphics website.
It's quite available, as a matter of fact. Yes, sir. Yes.
And you've got some work in a Spidey, what is it, 900 that's coming out or something like that?
1000. I want to say.
1000 gravy.
Yeah. I started working with Marvel about a year and a half ago, thereabouts. Started with a Luke Cage short story, which had a lot going on in it. And then they decided they were like, hey, do you want to spin this off into a mini series? I was like, fuck you, Marvel. Why would I want to work with you? No, I didn't say that. I was God. I was like, obviously I want to do that for sure. And then I'm sure you've probably heard that they decided to shit can the story 1 minute before it was scheduled to premiere, which is
such bullshit.
Still a decision I'm mystified by, but
we all are. Can you get it back and make it your own character or something like that, or is it owned by them?
Well, that's the thing. I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I created a character in that story called Joe Rockhead, which I loved. I thought she was an incredibly cool character. I was very excited about unleashing her upon the Marvel readership. I've asked them recently, like, guys, okay, if this is not gonna come out as a Luke Cage story, are you okay with me taking it back and let me just rejigger it and take my character with me and do something with it? I haven't heard anything back. I don't want to push it too far because I would like to extend this relationship with these folks.
Right.
Other than this particular snafu, they've actually been really fun to work with. They're cool. They're cool people, that I've worked with personally.
Yeah.
And I grew up reading Marvel comics. Obviously, I would I want to be part of that lineage. Right. So I don't want to like burn the bridge. But I would be lying if I said I wasn't. If I said I was if I didn't admit to being unhappy with how this particular situation worked out. Right. However, things have been going so far with, I finished off Spidey. That was super fun to work with, or to work on. I just found out
like a couple pager on that. Is it like a 4 or 5 pages?
That's going to be an 8-page story.
8 pages. Nice. Written by someone else?
No. This was written by me. Nice. And it's going to, I want to say who the art team is, because part of the art team is like one of my all-time favorite artists ever.
Yeah.
But I can't say, obviously.
Okay. All right.
But when the time finally comes, oh my God, I'm very excited to just have my name linked to this person.
It's pretty soon, right? It's pretty soon.
Yeah. I think it's coming out August, I want to say.
Okay.
So that's that. And then I'm just about to start on another project for them. It hasn't been announced yet, so I can't say what it is just yet. But I'm pretty excited about this. This is going to be a longer story. This one's going to be 18 pages.
Nice.
But I'm hoping to get to a point with these guys where I can I really want to write like a regular series. Like I'd love to do like a year or 2-year run on whatever. Give me like your crappiest selling comic and let me do something
a lot of times.
Exactly.
Where a visionary creator.
Yeah, man. Like Frank Miller. That's how he kind of got going. I'm no Frank Miller, but give me today's version of Daredevil and let me cut loose on that. That'd be a lot of fun.
And this would be you just writing or doing art or doing both, or?
Yeah, I do have more comics that I'm going to draw in my future, but I'm stepping away from drawing comics for the next year or two. The stuff that I there is something that I want to write and draw for Marvel that I've talked to them about, and I'm going to continue to nurture. But the stuff that I've got planned for them for the next little while is just going to be as a writer. Like I kind of want to step away from drawing and just focus I want to focus more on my filmmaking, put the drawing muscle into the filmmaking, and just be a scripter in comics.
Very cool.
Yeah, man. Writing comics is a lot of fun. It's like a lot of fun.
It's a different muscle to work than the
really
art.
Is.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I have like a lot of ideas, and it's it's a little difficult to draw everything that's in your mind. You know what I'm saying? So if you can put the words down on the page and have another talented individual realize it, that's a pretty good position to be in.
Yeah, I agree. All right, awesome. So a lot more to look for from Hoche Anderson. Sorry, Hoche Anderson. HC. Oh man,
HC is so much easier.
It is. But it means so much as someone who also has their name mispronounced a lot to get it right.
I totally hear you.
Well, thank you so much. Where else can people find you online? You're pretty pretty out there.
You can't find me on Twitter because I kind of think of Twitter as like the Black Plague, but you can find me on.
Horrible.
It's a little rough, man.
No,
it's a little rough out. It's a little rough out there, Twitterverse. But you can find me on Instagram, Coach Anderson 69. After my original one got hacked, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
And you can find me on Facebook. I'm there, most days. So I'm out there if you're so inclined.
All right, awesome. We're gonna all follow you. So from the Grendel cast, as we say every week, oh yes, Devil's Odyssey and Devil's Crucible coming up next.
Oh my God, I can't wait. Matt is on fire, man. That guy is killing it.
Fire. The TV series coming soon.
Stop it. It's the Matt Wagner world. We're just living in it.
Yes, exactly. So until next week, Vivat Grendel and keep on Grendeling.